What's up, y'all? Halloween's a couple days away, so I wanted to make a video about what I think is probably the most poppin' subgenre of dubstep right now, with that being scary riddim. And by scary riddim, I mean stuff in the same vein as guys like Muerte, Void, Advanced, people like that are putting out right now. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and play the example that I have here. And so there's three big concepts that I kind of came across that I think are really useful when you want to make your stuff scarier or have like that scary riddim feel to it. And that is how to use space and just space in general. Contrast, which is kind of ubiquitous, like a lot of different genre, everything uses contrast, but we'll kind of get into specifics with that. And then backing elements as part of your song. So we'll start with the one that helps, I think, the most. Or that I'd used the least and kind of was like a revelation for me, and that's space. I've kind of soloed out the main gun and sub of this track and rendered a copy out. The synths that kind of bounce back and forth between each other. Right, it's just kind of the main set of sounds that make up this track. So I took those and bounced them to audio up here, got rid of the drums, got rid of the backing synths. And as you can see, if I have these all soloed, it's mostly space. So like with the final rendered version, you can see there's a bunch of that is filled by the sub, but there's no sub in this. And it's just a lot of space. And what that allows for is a couple things. Like with a movie, actually, this is a great time to show an example. So what do you think is scarier? This?
I can still hear that voice.
Or this? And I think that one is kind of stupid because I edited it to be stupid, but like the point still stands. It's like without there being a lack of something, you can't have the extra impact that is given by like bringing it back or introducing it for the first time. So by giving space before each of the next, the claps would hit here, the kicks would hit here, that's obviously going to add space, and I've talked about that plenty of times before. But then another thing is like we don't have big growly basses that are taking up a ton of space here. It's really just like a sharp transient, a little bit of low mid right here. Like this is even like getting towards the sub range. And then like empty bar, an empty half bar right here where we bring in a sub element to like replace it, right? But as you can see with the sub too, the sub's not taking up a ton of space. And there's places where the sub is empty. Like here, there's no sub. There are some backing elements going on that I didn't include in it, but there's no sub in those elements, right? Right, so we're giving space for these two kind of quieter sounds that I'll probably go in and accentuate more in the mix and master of the final track, because I'm definitely gonna finish this one. I really love this project, but like by cutting all this out here and like introducing a new little gun hit up top on this one. Right, to give space for that. It adds impactfulness and spookiness when these next couple little growl hits come in. So basically what I'm trying to get at here is by leaving space for backing elements to come in and like bring a spookier tone, you're free to like have the heaviness of a single sound that's like punchy, but also have the like weirdly tonal, even like melodic, but in like a spooky way, backing elements to come in and reinforce that part of your track. So before we move on, I'll just go ahead and hop into a reference and show you that I'm not making this up out of nowhere. This is something that I've directly, I guess, swagged. What's the word for it? I have been influenced. What's the nice way of putting this? I basically stole this from other people, man. That's how EDM works, right? You just got to steal it better. So Advanced Muerte Skin Suit. What do we have going on here? A bunch of sounds, but a bunch of space as well. And then when we cut the sub out, look at how much space here. I'm just going to play these real quick and let you see. No sub. Right? Same thing with another Muerte ID. But this one's not an ID. That's Doppler Riddim. And you can see that's his main sound there. So once he moves into different sounds in this track, right, it gives that like sweep there a bunch more impact because he's got so little space taken up in the high end. I hope that I don't piss anybody off by making this video, but you know, I'm just kind of referring to who I'm enjoying the most at this point. Muerte, obviously, because I have 3 of his tracks as the first references, and Advances on Skin Suit. Right, sounds really full. Then you pull the sub out, and then also by there being a ton of space, where he's filled it with reverb here. There's a sweep on that part, but I can't really parse exactly what it is, but it sounds like reverb mixed with like a sub high-end layer. Then we got like the AT Aliens Void Purgatory collaboration, which is such a good track. Is that not just the coolest waveform you've ever seen? Look at this. That's just a very cool looking spectrogram to me. It's interesting. You don't see a lot of stuff like that. Just super cool. A lot of space going on there. And then lastly, Void Magic Armor. I'll just play the rendered out. Probably the one with the least space of any of these. But that's just because it's been filled. As you can hear, we have the main element, right? I'll kind of pull this down. The main element going on right here, and then like a little rhythmy hit. That's mostly taking up that top and probably a little bit of the mid space. I'm sorry, I'm sick, y'all, so if I get coughing through this video, you just have to forgive me. Right, so just as a quick little recap, we're using space as a tension impact tool, right? It increases the impact by creating tension. We're using space to create contrast because the more space that you leave, the more a new element has an area to fit in, right? If you're just packing more and more sounds in, at a certain point, they get lost in like a noise soup. And then lastly, and leading into my next little section, it leaves space for backing elements. And so for this track, I have a couple of different backing elements going on. So everything together sounds like this, just to kind of remind you. I have just my backing layers, so. Right, so I basically have 2 different sets of sounds going on here. So my first backing element that I have here is called Blood Flow, and I don't think many of y'all are going to have this plugin, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time breaking it down. Its form, you might have seen it if you have complete. I think 11 was the one that they introduced this on, and I haven't bought one since that one. So in Complete 11, they released this sampler. I think it's basically like a granular synth that doesn't. It's some kind of a sampler or granular synth. I'm not going to try and over explain it. I don't really know, so I'd just be making shit up. But basically what it does is scans through the waveform of the sound, and then you use this little curve editor. If I scroll this out, as you can see, I have my 4 little sounds. The original sample for this that I used was from a sound design session. It sounds like this. Right, just kind of like an overly processed wubby growl. And so then you have these little articulation slots that just change this curve, as you can see right here, of the way that it's running through this waveform. And so once I play it, you'll probably get a fairly decent idea of what's going on. Right, as you can see, this is changing, which changes how this moves. The rate changes a bit. And then lastly, there's some effects in here that I've like set macro knobs up and stuff for. But basically, that's how that works. And so then the other thing that is cool about this is you can use the bottom set of notes here controls the articulation slot, right? So it's changing this. But then I have a separate note set that I put up here to control the tone of it, right? So this is what the pitch it's playing is at. So that's how that basic sound design part of this works. And then the effects on this are what really make it be what it is in this track. And that's like a multifaceted little piece here where we have the blood flow. I basically went through, wrote this pattern, chopped parts out of it where I felt like it needed a backer to complement the main synths, right? Right, so I'm not doing backers on this section. I'm not doing backers on this section. I also change how the backer works here using the effects, right? So when I have my reverb hits happen, we get this like really yowie, extended, weird growl type thing. And the way that works is via MultiPass. And I'll come back to this in a second, but I just want to kind of finish. And so basically this is all coming from this blood flow synth, right? We just change the MultiPass on this part, and then again here we change the MultiPass again. Right, and that's just to kind of add a little back layer to this. Give it some texture, give it a little bit of uniqueness. And then secondly, we have another backing layer at the bottom that I called Letty Lead. And it's, again, just copying the same pattern from up here, the top set of notes, which I kind of felt was just a good Halloween pattern or whatever. And then I went in and just kind of muted parts where I felt like it didn't need extra layering, right? Right, that's a little too much going on for me, so that helps it stand out more. Again, we're using our space wisely. And the Letty Lead real quick is just another sound design session where I have made a bunch of little scary sounds that I think are like good Riddim backing layers. That's the original sound for that one. I just pitched it down. And then probably played really high notes. I do a lot of stuff that's like roundabout like that, just getting what works going. So yeah, let's talk about how we turned this original patch here that I'm gonna have to play. Let's talk about how we turned that into a bunch of different things. So first of all, let me just say this blood flow synth macro. So that changes the formant of all of these different layers. And so that's kind of changing the input tone, right? As you can see, it's just kind of changing the tone of it. So that's the only thing that's changing the input that's happening. And so basically, just to kind of skip the MultiPass for a second, I just have an EQ here that's accentuating my frequencies that I want accentuated, cutting the sub out of it, and then compressing it. Just so we get, and it's super light compression. I should have went. I'll probably change that to be way heavier in the final version of this track, but it's just basically to glue it together and keep all these different tones that we're getting out of it from being too many different, too different acoustically. I want them to kind of stay in the same space. So then I run it through a MultiPass that is called Glassy Attitude 2. And why is that? Because I made this MultiPass preset from this Glassy Attitude Canned Up Shimmer by let me give credit to Toby Green. I think made this. I don't know who he is, but I changed his preset, so I don't want to just cop his stuff and not give him some credit. He made the original. I tweaked it. And so what this does is it sends the sound through, and it's kind of the original sound there. So then the flanger is not on by default, so we'll skip past that one. It does send it through a delay. And as you can see, that delay is being pumped where the feedback extends out to the quarter note, which all of these hits are on a quarter note, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter note per bar. That lets the tail decay out, but not be this resonator soup. So then we send it through a pitch shifter that's at 50%. And it's pitched down just barely. So that's just kind of detuning it, almost like giving it a chorusy effect. Also making it a little more unstable, which helps with like horror music, I think. Then a filter, kind of doing a self-explanatory thing there. And then I send it through another filter. And which is cutting the gain down a lot because it's cutting a lot of the frequencies out. And then I bring the gain back up with this gain increaser right here. Then we have a formant filter. Oh, and by the way, the mix on this is set to 50%. So it's not going... That's the full signal. This is the half signal that we are working with. It kind of changes it significantly by not going all the way. It lets the original signal go through as well. So then we have a formant filter that's kind of just doing a random little articulation here that's mixed even lower. Right? You hear how the full formant filter can kind of get a little too resonant. Then lastly, I'm pretty sure this track's in D. Let me just look at my sub because my sub will be, yeah, the track's in D. So I'm sending it through a resonator, halfway mix, halfway intensity, really short decay. It's set to D5. Again, halfway mix on the output, and then a little bit of distortion. Actually, it's quite a bit of distortion, but because it's mixed to 80% and then 50% of 80%, it's just not that impactful. It just kind of brings up the frequencies. So that is this MultiPass without having all the little features that are in it turned on. So these little features that I'm talking about is there's the blood knob, and I'm probably going to have to change this while it's playing. Right, and you hear how that gives it a little bit of warbliness. And so the way that that does that is it turns the mix all the way up on this flanger that wasn't up at all before. It also changes the cutoff of the filters there. It changes the formant filter in two different ways. So it's moving the X and Y axis. And then it turns the, and then what I already said, which is the flanger mix. So that's basically just running it through a flanger and then varying some of the filtering done to it. And what that ends up sounding like is what I just played. Which, if I go to this point in the track, I believe that's what this section is. And let's see. Yeah, so that's with the macro turned up that changes the formants. I know this is kind of complex, but I mean, I can't really explain it without explaining it. So as you can see, it's turned the formant knob up on my input, which gives it a weird tone. Right, so if I turn off my MultiPass, oh, I turned back on. I gotta, right, that's the input. And it's using the blood automation here to turn the knob on in the MultiPass, right? So that's doing that. Then we have this poisoning knob, and this does a very simple thing. It just turns up the feedback, which gives us our blood poisoning. Right? So we're getting that input and just making weird tails out of it. So these top purple ones, the darker purple, all relate to the MultiPass. The first one is just turns off both of my MultiPasses because I have two different variations here. This first one is one that has a slightly different flanger. Ping pong is on, and the pitch shifter does not correlate. So correlation is off. The second one, the flanger I think is a little different in here. The ping pong's off, and then the pitch shifter does correlate with low compensation. So this first knob turns the wetness on these two MultiPasses up and down, and I have it set to 100% because we're using both the MultiPasses. The second knob here picks between up being the first one and down being the second one. Right, so at that point right there, we switch. Going between one and the other. And so while the blood is on, that flanger turns on, which gives it that little bit, a little bit more of a metallic sound. And then when we turn the poison knob up, remember the poison changes the feedback. So blood has to be on because that flanger is being used. Like if the flanger is not on, turning the feedback up on an off flanger does nothing. So we got to have blood on. Then we do the poisoning, which is turning that feedback up, which gives us just some interesting little tones here. And the differentiation in tones on these two comes from changing the input, right? We're changing the formant in the original form synth. So that's all I can really show for this one, y'all. I didn't save all the sound design for these parts, but since you stuck to this point in the video, thank you, because that watch time helps the channel a lot. It helps people find these videos, so thank you for that. And since you stuck around, what I'm going to be giving away for this one is all of the main bass little gunny hits. I'll give all those to you just in a little single format because there's a couple different variations of it, but I'll give all those to you. I guess I could do these. Yeah, the screepy hits. We'll do the screepies, the gun hits. Oh, I'll condense all these blood poisoning layers into one wave file since nobody's probably going to have the form plugin. I'll give the blood flow layer and also the blood flow rack with these multi-passes. Actually, I'll just do the multi-pass because the rack is going to be unuseful unless you watch the whole video and like really 1000% understood it. So I'll give away the multi-pass preset and those things. Thank you for watching to this point. Have a fun Halloween. Stay safe. I'll see y'all in the next one.